These just got to wait for the screen to catch up. So this little chunk will get edited out once the video is uploaded. Adverts. Just skip the adverts, I think. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I hope you're all safe and well out there. Welcome back to Brooks's Bass Corner. First time we've done a live chat for a couple of months. Things have been rather hectic, so the live chats had to go on the back burner for a short while, but I hope you're all safe and well out there, coming out of the pandemic now, and I hope life is treating you well. The reason for this kind of last minute live chat today is it occurred to me this morning, and I already knew that today was the 40th anniversary of Rio's launch. It didn't occur to me that it was also the 34th anniversary of Lovesexy by Prince, and I thought, well, if there's two albums that I've never stopped listening to and still listen to quite regularly, it's probably those two albums. So it'd probably make a good a pair of subjects to do a live chat. So hopefully you guys out there are either fans of Duran Duran or Prince, or you might just be great bass players generally and have an appreciation either of the artist and the band or the albums as well. I'm quite fortunate that quite a lot of my musical friends and musical circle that I work in have a very high appreciations both of these albums and the bands and the artists. So I thought this would make a great live chat to talk to people about these albums. And obviously there's always a younger musical fraternity coming up behind us old timers, and they either may not be aware of these albums, they may not be aware of the role these albums played in again, this band and this artist, and in terms of their careers. So I thought, well, I kind of lived through all that and saw these bands at their peaks and followed them, still follow them, huge fans of both. And I really wasn't aware that both of these albums were launched on the same date, obviously different year. But I thought they'd make a great topic for conversation. So thank you for joining us, or joining me. And let's talk over the next hour or so. And if you've got any comments about either album or the bands or the artist, and certainly if you're a bass player, and obviously you've come to Brooks's Bass Corner, so I would imagine you probably are a bass player. Any comments you might have, any perspective on either of these albums and the relevant band and artist? You know, certainly in the case of Rio, in this case, that was the album that catapulted Duran Duran to a worldwide audience. The first album had done very well, and had it not been for Rio and how that sort of took off as MTV got behind it, and the album was remixed for American radio, but if it hadn't taken off in America and the band had needed to take a little longer, maybe they wouldn't still be a band around with us today. And here we are 40 years, well, it's more than 40 now, isn't it? I think it's like 44 years. They may not well be around today, but certainly that paved the way for Duran Duran to become a worldwide band. And then Lovesexy, an album for a lot of people that kind of signposted the end of Prince's sort of glorious era in the 80s. After this, the next album was Batman, which was a partial soundtrack album. Then we had Diamonds and Pearls, and then it all kind of went a bit strange. For those of us that are Prince fans, we can kind of look at it critically and say, actually, this was kind of a stop point for that first period in his career. For me, it kind of signaled me sort of jumping on board big time with what Prince had done up to that point, and the rest of his career until he passed away. Partly because that was the first tour that I saw him, and he, in fact, the show I saw at Wembley Arena in August 1988 was a real epiphany for me. It was one of the few times I've ever been to see an artist or a band and basically went out and bought the entire back catalogue. Normally, if I get into a band, I'll pick 4 or 5 albums, and again, if they've got quite a large repertoire and catalogue, I'll identify a number of albums and go and buy those albums and sort of listen to them quite fervently, and then I'll sort of pick up the rest of the catalogue over time. With Prince, it was a completely different episode. The Lovesexy 88 tour simply blew my mind. I'd never seen a show like it, even though it was in the round and other bands and artists had done shows in the round before. I was mesmerized with what I saw at Wembley Arena that night, and it coincided, Prince's tour of Europe coincided with Michael Jackson's Bad tour in 1988. So Michael Jackson was at Wembley Stadium, Prince was at Wembley Arena. As far as I'm aware, and a lot of people I've spoken to that went to see both tours, obviously the Michael Jackson thing is on a bigger scale because it's in a stadium, but the interaction with the audience is more difficult because of the sheer scale, size, and number of people you've got in the venue. Prince's show was far more intimate, although, you know, you'd look at a place like Wembley Arena and think, well, that's not a small show, but it allowed that Lovesexy show in the round to just, I don't know, it felt intimate to me, and what I witnessed simply changed my musical life. I'd never seen a show that choreographed, and if you've seen the Lovesexy recording from Dortmund, which was filmed towards, well, it was the last night of the European tour, it's literally every song is bang, 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 bang. He had moments where he interacted with the audience, and but generally his catalogue at that point allowed him to sort of pick album tracks, and he wouldn't play the entire song. He'd play snippets of songs and splice them in, and then go off on 2 or 3 other songs, and then come back to the song that was before. It was amazing, and I've never seen anything like it since. And I count myself very fortunate that I actually got to see a show on that tour. It was off the scale. The tour after it was called the Nude Tour, which came a year after Batman and coincided with Graffiti Bridge, which was a film and an album, again, another soundtrack. And that was a far more kind of stripped down, back to basics show. He played at one end of the arena and the rest of the arena was the audience. And a lot of the theatricality of Lovesexy and again, the choreographed nature of that show was very different when it got to the Nude Tour, and also the band was different. The Lovesexy tour was the last point where he was using Sheila E. and Levi Seeker Jr. and Miko Weaver and Bonnie Boyer and the team that he was using at that point. So here we are, 2 albums celebrating their anniversary today. By all means, contribute, please. Leave your messages. I will sort of talk and chat and bring you guys into the conversation, and it's a 2-way street, so the interaction gives me more to talk about, and if you guys have got points you'd like to sort of contribute, then that's great. I can see we've got Stu Goodman there. Good evening, sir. Hope you're well. Evening, Mike. Who played bass on the Prince album? Ashamed to say, never listened to it. Well, on this album, Prince did a whole load of the work himself. The only track that's got a different bass player on, which again is the same bass player that was on the tour, is Levi Seeker Jr., but he only plays on track 1. Now, if I turn this CD over, This is one of the releases from, I think this was 88. I don't think this is a repress from the 90s. So basically, you'll see a track listing on the back. The actual way that the CD and the album came out was Prince wanted people to listen to the whole album rather than skipping tracks. So on the CD, if you stick this in your CD player, it comes up as one track. You haven't been ripped off, but basically those tracks, I think it's 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These 9 tracks are all compressed into one file, one track. So you literally have to press play. If you want to skip to another track, you have to fast forward through the track. Later iterations and releases, I think, were broken down into 9 separate tracks. But also some of the vinyl on the original release didn't have the track markers. If you look at a piece of vinyl, you'll see songs are broken up. Say you've got 5 songs per side, there'll be a track. That didn't exist. So again, you had to listen to the whole of side 1, turn the album over, and then you would listen to side 2. But you couldn't just necessarily pick up the stylus and drop it in the correct place. It'd be guesswork. And if you didn't want to scratch your vinyl, it probably wasn't a great idea to go down that route. But yeah, so Prince played all the bass on this except track 1, which is I Know. And that actually, I think, I could go into Wikipedia, but I mean, you can do this yourselves if you're watching the video or later on. Track 1, I Know, features the touring band. So he's got Sheila E on drums, he's got Miko Weaver on guitar, Bon is on there, I think Dr. Fink's on there. But the rest of the album is Prince. And I don't need to tell you what an amazing bass player Prince was. And on this album, if you listen to it on headphones and really sort of take it in, the actual recording and engineering, mixing, production, arrangement is outstanding. And this is probably one of the reasons why I listen to this album really regularly, is because it is just a real work of art from a genius who at that point could do no wrong. This wasn't the original album that was planned for 88. It was meant to be the Black Album, which became a controversial release. So basically done Sign of the Times. There was a lot going on in his life. Sign of the Times was meant to be a triple album, I think, or possibly a quadruple. Might have been 4 sides, I think. And what came next was meant to be what was called the Black Album. The Black Album got canned allegedly for a number of reasons, but I've read stuff online, and again, you never know if it's true or not. He had an experience with ecstasy, and mentally it affected him, and so he thought the Black Album was way too dark and he would release it later on in his career. So that got canned, and the album that came out instead was Lovesexy. So this was recorded in January and February of 88, released on the 10th of May in America. And obviously later on, the Black Album had an official release, I think in 1994, I think the same year that the Come album came out, a couple of months after that. But basically Black became one of the most bootlegged albums of all time, and copies of it were changing hands on vinyl, cassette, and I think CD for silly money. So to put a stop to that, Prince released an official version of it in 94. So in Prince's mind, originally, this wasn't an album we were going to get. This came around, could you say by accident? Maybe, maybe not. But the material on it is just exceptional. I've seen quotes from him where he claimed it was generally it's a fight between good and evil, God and the devil, and it's a very spiritual, psychedelic album. I can see his point. I've never kind of gone into that side with Prince. I'll take it as I find it. But yeah, so that answers your question, Stuart. It's Prince, a apart from track 1, it's Prince playing bass on all that. So, you know, all the slap stuff and slap stuff on Alphabet Street, it's him. And if you've ever seen the clip that came from I'm not sure who the originator was, but it was shown on BBC Two in 1989. There was like a 15-minute biography piece on Prince, which also featured some of the Batman stuff and the video of Party Man. And there were people like Miles Davis and Terence Trent D'Arby and various celebrities talking about Prince. Eric Clapton was on there. There's a clip of him playing along to the bass line of Party Man in the studio. And that would give you an idea of what his bass playing was and how it sounded at this time of Lovesexy. And he was using, I think it's a graphite instrument by a German manufacturer. I think they're called Auerswald. And so it's basically similar to the guitar that he uses in Alphabet Street with like the shock absorber bar. But he was using one of those basses to do the Batman stuff. So I would imagine he's probably using it on this as well. Amazing tone. There's a clip of it on YouTube, which is just that bass solo and him playing along with the track in the studio, and just your jaw hits the ground. Just, you know, the tone and the playing, and he makes it look so easy, which obviously for a musical genius it probably was, but for us mere mortals it was a little more involved, I would say. But there we go. So your reply says, I love Rhonda Smith's playing with Prince. Some very tasty fretless stuff. Hey, Rhonda is fabulous. I had a email conversation with Rhonda in the late 2000s, so probably around 2007, 2008. There's a live release called One Night Alone, which had a re-release a couple of years ago. And she's playing bass on it, and it took place, I think, around about 2002, maybe 2003, or it may even been 2001, just after the release of Rainbow Children. And she's playing a jazz bass on it, and she has a fuzz tone. There's a couple of tracks where she uses this fuzz tone, and it's obvious that they're kind of going for the Larry Graham fuzz tone, that sort of funky fuzz tone. And I said to her, what are you using to get that fuzz? She said, oh, it's just what Larry uses. And I said, well, he uses old 60s fuzz pedals, so is it one of those? She went, oh, no. She said he doesn't take them on the road anymore. He uses a Dan Electro Fab Tone. Dan Electro Fab Tones aren't particularly expensive pedals, but obviously this is what she was using. He uses them, so I use them. And lo and behold, I went and tracked one down on eBay, got the pedal, and that was the tone there and then. And Rhonda's playing is fabulous, and still a great player now. You know, she flies the flag for female bass players mightily, and she's just an impressive bass player, but very easy to talk to via email. She was quite happy to chat about anything bass related. So yeah, enjoy Rhonda Smith. Check her out, and she's done a lot of stuff. So have a look at her Wikipedia discography, and you'll see a lot of the stuff she's done. So there we go. So I've started down this track, haven't I? So we'll do this first, I guess, and we'll come to the Rio album second. So what can I tell you? So my experience with Lovesexy, so I've said on other videos and various things online that for me, I didn't get fully onto the Prince train until this album and this tour. Partly because I was very much a Duran Duran fan, Queen fan, disco fan, Earth, Wind and Fire. And up until, I guess, Purple Rain, for a lot of people in the UK maybe, Prince wasn't necessarily on everyone's radar. And his stuff up to Purple Rain, so if you think of things like Dirty Mind, Controversy, his live appearances were very risque, I guess would be the thing. And I would have been 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. Purple Rain came out when I was 12, so all the early stuff wasn't necessarily on my radar. I can remember hearing 1999 when that came out, and I remember reading in various sort of pop magazines at the time, there was this new innovator called Prince, and he played guitar like Jimi Hendrix, and He played keyboards like Stevie Wonder, and he was the new Stevie Wonder, who wrote everything, produced everything, could play every instrument. But he still wasn't on my radar. Then obviously Purple Rain happened, and what a huge album that was. I loved Purple Rain, and then when another Around the World in a Day came out in '85, it wasn't really my thing. I loved Raspberry Beret, but my cousins, I've got two male cousins who were very into Prince from the moment they heard Purple Rain. They bought Around the World in a Day, and I remember listening to it going, this isn't for me. And then Parade in '86, I thought Kiss was very clever, but again, it wasn't ticking any boxes for me, at all, until in late '86 I heard Another Love, A Hole in Your Head, which was released as a single here in the UK, and I thought, okay, I really like that. Now that I can get behind. And then it was only a couple of months until Sign the Times came out, and that blew me away. And at that point, I was just starting to become a bass player, and I was getting into things like James Brown and a lot of the funk stuff. And as a kid, obviously we didn't have YouTube. If you wanted music, you either went and bought it, or you went to your local library and borrowed it for a month or so. And every time he released a single off of Sign the Times, I thought, yeah, this is now starting to tick my boxes. And I loved If I Was Your Girlfriend and I Could Never Take the Place of Your Man. And from that point, I was like, right, okay, I need to start buying more of the albums here. I need to get behind this. And when Lovesexy came out and I'd heard Alphabet Street, I thought, wow, yeah, I've got to go and see him. And one of my cousins had tickets, I think, for a couple of nights. I think I'm right there. But anyway, and it was either August the 1st or August the 8th. I think it was August the 1st. And we went to see him at Wembley Arena, me, my cousin, a friend of mine who's a drummer, and we all stood there. And for the first set, we didn't say a word to each other, and it was relentless. It was one song after another, after another, after another. Bits. It was like, and I remember we got to the break, and it was a 2-set show, and the lights came up, and the three of us just stood there. We were 16 years old. And we were all going. No one said anything. It was like real kind of hushed. Everyone had applauded and clapped and whatever, but we were just stood there, 3 16-year-olds going, what the hell have we just seen? What the hell have we just seen? And I looked at my cousin and he said, I can't believe that. What was that? And the drummer was like, I mean, he was gobsmacked at what Sheila E was doing. And we just went, wow, what was that? I can't wait for the second half. And next day went and bought all the albums. And from that point on, I was a confirmed Prince fan. And I was just completely mesmerized. And from that point, I had to learn what all these songs were and learn what the back catalogue was, and really deep listening into what the album tracks were and what was going on and how he created his songs and what the bass player was doing and whether it was Prince playing bass or whether it was someone else playing bass. And for then 4 weeks later to see the show again, but on the TV, because there was a live stream, a slight delay on the live stream, but it was the final show from Germany, which is what became the Lovesexy '88 video and laserdisc. To then have a copy of that on video that I could watch anytime I wanted. And bear in mind also at this point, the Sign of the Times film had been released in the cinema. So there was that to see as well. And then that came out on VHS video that Christmas. It was like a compendium of Prince in 1988. And it just completely coloured my my musical education. It really did. And as you can probably tell, it's kind of left an indelible mark on me as a musician. And in terms of bass playing, I mean, I love this album to death. The bass playing's on it, just outstanding work. And obviously everyone always thinks of Alphabet Street with this album, but there were 2 other singles off it. There was Glam Slam, and there was also I Wish You Heaven, or at least here in the UK. I think there may have been a single release of Anesthesia, maybe. My Prince released knowledge, because there's so much, and he released different things in different parts of the world. I could be wrong on that, I'm not sure. But everyone always thinks of Alphabet Street relating to that album. But it kind of, I mean, if you read up on Wikipedia or any Prince sort of discography stuff, you'll see it was possibly his worst selling album prior to 1981. So it didn't do well in terms of sales. It still went to #1 here in the UK, and I think in New Zealand, Holland, a couple of other places in Europe, but it didn't do particularly well in America. I think it was his first album since Dirty Mind that didn't go top 10 on the Billboard album chart, I think. But for me, it just holds its own, and I can listen to it happily, start to finish, without any track skipping, and just love it. I have no issues with the Lovesexy album whatsoever. So yeah, I suggest, if you don't own it or haven't ever listened to it the whole way through, do yourselves a favor. This is a great album. So happy 34th birthday to Lovesexy. Okay, let's move over to Rio. A classic. So much of a classic, it is easily one of the most recognizable album covers, and the content on this album defined kind of 1982 and possibly the first half of the 80s, and it just changed a lot of things. So for me, so where did Rio come in my life? So I remember hearing Hungry Like the Wolf on BBC Radio 1. Mike Reed was the DJ. I think it had just been released, like it was being released that day, and it could well have been the first play on national radio. Obviously My Own Way had been released in late 81, but the version on this album is very different. But Hungry Like the Wolf, just, it made it, for me, it made this band vital. I remember hearing it with a 10-year-old's ears, and just thought, that epitomizes everything I would want to hear in a band at that point in my life. So it had Andy Taylor's power chords, it had John Taylor's bass playing. John and Roger were, for a young band, and this is their second album, I mean, what a formidable rhythm section. And I guess the producer, Colin Thurston, had a great role to play in this. And I think the band always say, you know, he really brought the best out of us at that time. And I remember hearing Hungry Like the Wolf, and that had completely, I went to school having just listened to that on the radio, and I was like, oh my God, that's my band. That's the band I'm going to follow for, or be one of the bands I'm going to follow for the rest of my life. At that point, I was very much into disco stuff, and I had a pop ear. I would listen to the radio, so anything on the radio that caught my ear, I'd pick up on and I'd enjoy. I'd been a fan of Adam and the Ants up to that point, and they, well, at that point, so May 82, Adam and the Ants were no more. It was Adam Ant. He still had Marco Peroni in his band, but it was a very different thing. Wasn't aware at the time that that was kind of the start of the end of Adam Ant being hugely popular in the UK, but that's fine. I was a Queen fan already, very much into Chic, Earth, Wind and Fire, but I would listen to the radio all the time and pick up on stuff. As soon as I heard Hungry Like the Wolf, that was me sold, hook, line and sinker. And it changed everything for me. I became a Durrani from that point on. I can't change that, and I'm very proud of it. And I followed that band through thick and thin. I'm not the sort of Dram fan that will just say everything is fabulous that they've released. That's not me at all. I can be quite critical of certain things that either I don't like or I don't enjoy. But But looking back, if we're looking back 40 years, and the brain isn't quite as perfect as it was, but obviously, it changed so much. I mean, you look back, and the clothes they wore, and their sort of fashion, their approach with clothes. And obviously John had been an art student, I think, and what he and Nick, kind of their picture of what the band should be. And I think that in 82, so many things were changing, sort of musically and in terms of society. And the punk thing had been left behind, the new wave was changing into something else, and disco had gone, and here they were kind of amalgamating all of these different musical sort of facets and things that they wanted it to be. And it was going to be a cross between Chic and the Sex Pistols, and it was going to be this and that. And it was like, well, here it is. And I heard Hungry Like the Wolf, having been a fan already of Planet Earth and Girls on Film. Careless Memories I wasn't so aware of, because I didn't buy the first album, I think, until 1983. But suddenly this was everywhere. It was on the radio constantly. It was on Top of the Pops. It was, you heard it in the shops. It was just everywhere. And then the fact that Save a Prayer came out really quite soon after Hungry Like the Wolf had done its thing. And then we got Rio in the autumn. And I guess that was on along with the UK tour. Obviously from we've seen all the Hammersmith stuff, and I was too young. I was up in Scotland at the time, so I wouldn't have been allowed to go to any of those shows. But anything that came out Duran Duran wise from that point that I heard Hungry Like the Wolf, I was lapping that up. And here we go, 40 years on, and it's still an album I can listen from start to finish, and it really has stood the test of time. I mean, what John was doing on bass really lit a fuse for me. And I know he said in interviews, maybe he just put everything he had on the table, and that's what came out. But for a guy who was that young, and that's the second album, with limited touring experience as well, I mean, it's a masterclass in what's possible. And a lot of bass players probably would say he's never topped it. That's debatable. I think a lot of musicians, when they're younger, will play their asses off, and as they get older and not sensible, but they'll as their musical education continues, they'll make different choices, and maybe some of the things he did on there, maybe he might think, well, I wish I'd held back on that for like the third album or the fourth album. But as a statement of what he was able to do and how he was able to come up with those lines, I mean, it's quite fabulous, quite outstanding. Obviously he was using his Aria basses. I think it was an SB 1200, which was the twin pickup version of the SB 1000 on this album. He'd used a 600, I think, on the first album, but for this it was the SB 1200. Yet live and on TV, very often you'd see him with the SB 1000, which was the one pickup version. So there was always this movement of basses in the John Taylor arsenal. And certainly on a lot of the TV work promoting the tracks from this album, I mean, you could see him sometimes with a Steinberger, or he might have I think an Aria Cardinal, I think. There was also the Aria Thor, and there's a clip on YouTube of them doing Rio with like this cream Aria bass, and obviously it's not an SB, it's I think it might be a Cardinal. So he was obviously trying different instruments out and using different things, but what he used on that album pretty much defined what he would then carry on using for the next 4 or 5 years, until the Kabikis came along in 85, and then the Arias weren't seen again until the band reformed in 2001, and he brought, well, I don't know how many of the original ones of his he still had, but obviously by that point the reissues had started coming out, so that's kind of what we saw him using in 2003, 2004, 2005. But if you go through the tracks, I mean, literally every track on here apart from the chauffeur, although obviously there's bass later on in the chauffeur, he's not holding back. And even on things like Save a Prayer, which has a bit more of a fretlessy tone, which he's using chorus pedals and such like, and in Lonely in Your Nightmare as well, there's some different bass sounds, but it just sounds very vital, very energetic. And you know, the fact we're still discussing this and it's still being held up as a classic album, just goes to show how they really kind of hit the bullseye with this album. And the combination of how the band played, how they got their ideas across, you know, the graphic artwork, the Patrick Nagel artwork, and obviously there are some alternative designs to this. If you go on to Google and click on images, you'll see all sorts of different versions of this cover. There's a black version with a slightly different version of the Rio girl. It's all very stylized, but they really, I think it was Sorted Images, wasn't it, the company, the graphic design company, and it just served a real purpose for all the releases from this album. Again, you see any of the singles, any of the albums, any of the DVDs now that relate to this period in Duran Duran's history, and it's very iconic. But yeah, so 40 years old today. Wow, I couldn't tell you where 40 years went. I really couldn't. But you've worn well. And obviously, over the years, there have been various updated releases. There's a collector's edition, which has a variety of demos and different mixes and different 12-inch versions and some extra live versions. So if you don't own Rio already, or you want to check out which version to listen to online, there is another version, which is the American version, which has the David Kirschenbaum remixes, which I think are also on the collector's edition. But so the story behind that, the American record company didn't think the original version of Rio as an album was right for American radio. So they got a guy called David Kirschenbaum to remix, I think, 5 of the tracks, which obviously would have been the singles and the more up-tempo tracks on here. And things like Hold Back the Rain, Rio, Last Chance on the Stairway. I think he might have done New Religion as well. Hungry Like the Wolf. They were a bit more rocky and kind of, I think the drums were a bit more sort of powerful and the guitars were brought to the fore. And again, initially it didn't take off, but what they then found was that the states in America that had MTV and that were backed up with airplay of the tracks and the album, those states that had MTV, the sales went through the roof. The states didn't have MTV, so they weren't seeing the videos. It didn't sell so well. So there was obviously a correlation between the stuff going on the radio, people then seeing the videos, and obviously what iconic videos they are, and then the album just went ballistic. And from that point on, Duran's popularity in America, I don't think has ever waned, and that's why there's such a big fan base in the States for what the band does, and why that is still a very revered album. And I've posted on my social media today about the fact that this is the 40th anniversary of Rio, and a lot of the people that come back with comments are American bass players or American Duran fans, and they really did take that album to their hearts. And I think because the big singles on that album still form quite a large chunk of the Duran live repertoire, because it's the songs that people want to hear, it's what they remember, that goes to show just what an indelible effect that had. And certainly if you look at other bands of the era, it's like if I look at Yes, when they were on tour with 90125, their wardrobe was so Duran like, and the clothes they were wearing and the cut of the clothes, and it's very you saw that the effect of Duran Duran on music and other bands and other artists. And if you look at Live Aid, a lot of the clothes, obviously things have moved on from 82, but everything had a certain Duran look. Maybe that's just me with a child's eye looking at it, but even if I look back now at certain videos, and Live Aid would be a good example, you know, you look at David Bowie and his suit and Bowie's stuff with Let's Dance, and that's very Duranified. And they just seem to have that influence. Everyone wanted to kind of have that look, and I think because of the impact the videos had, that was a look that was popular. So, you know, other bands and artists would go, well, we kind of want a bit of what that's about. And even then, I guess in 84, 85, and like I say, you look at Yes's live 90125 footage, there's a definite Duran aspect to the clothes and the wardrobe. But there we go. And then they went off and did Power Station in Arcadia. Live Aid happened and everything changed. Nothing was the same from that point. But, you know, at least that album came out, and what they did. And it's that's had a huge musical impression on my whole playing career, my whole musical sensibility, and I can still get excited listening to that album, even though I know those songs back to front. And you know, they still translate very well live, having seen Duran a number of times over the years. It's crowd pleasing material, you know, that's what those songs are. Before we go any further, and I'm waiting for some questions on the live chat, there will be links for these t-shirts that are behind me. The Prince t-shirt comes from a place in Poole in Dorset, here on the south coast of England, called Rocket. You will find them on eBay, not on eBay, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I think they may have an eBay shop. You can buy online direct. There will be links in the description box below this video. So if you like the Lovesexy t-shirt, which also has a print on the back, and this is all part of the official and approved Prince Estate merchandise. They have a whole load of official merchandise that the Prince Estate has approved. So if you're after Prince merchandise or clothing or any sort of like accessories, pens, mugs, anything that's a bit hard to find in terms of CDs and DVDs, this place is the place to go. I've bought a number of t-shirts and other bits and pieces from there. They're great people to deal with. So if you're after any of this stuff, there will be a link directly below. The Duran t-shirt might be a bit harder to source because that was a tour t-shirt from 2004. But again, if I can find some online, I will put a link below. If you're enjoying the video, please hit the subscribe button. Give the video a thumbs up, which you can do below. And if you'd like to hear and be notified when I release new videos, hit the notification bell and select all. And then whenever there's a live chat planned or a new video being released and premiered, you will get notification on your device. So let's see if we have any further questions. So Stu, if you're still there, feel free to come back with any other questions you might have. So if we're talking bass gear, certainly with the Duran stuff, I've mentioned he was using his Arias. Strings wise, he was using rotor sounds, but I'm not sure if at that point he had moved to super wounds. So at some point he moved to using super wound, which were made by rotor sound. The whole point of that string was the core that runs through the whole string was exposed. And what that did was, not only did it make the string more flexible if you wanted to bend the string or use vibrato on it, it would also improve the clarity of the harmonics because there's less of the string winding going over the bridge saddle. Mark King also used super wounds, although there were two different sets, in fact three. There were super wound 303s, super wound 505s, and super wound 606s, and there may even have been a couple of others. 606s, I think, were the nickel strings. I think the 303s were the steel. It could be the other way around. 505s, I think, were the half wounds. And I think they were called ground wounds, and they were in a yellow packet. And then there were other super wound strings in that range. But John moved over to those at some point. One of the things with super wound strings was the fact that on the back was like a table, a graphic table, because they had to produce different strings for different bases, because the distance between the anchoring point of the string ball and then the saddle and then the playing section where the playing windings of the string would start for the player were different based on the scale and the actual physical properties of the bridge. So what's the distance? So obviously on an alembic, there's one here on the wall, but I'll try and explain it to you. There's a bridge tailpiece. The ball then goes in that tailpiece, and then there's quite a distance until you reach the brass bridge. On a fender bass, that was much reduced because literally the string is anchored and then it passes straight over the bridge. So they had to produce different strings for different bass manufacturers. So on the back of this packet was like, you would have Aria, you would have Alembic, you would have JD, you would have Ibanez, you would have Yamaha, you would have Fender, and it would say what the different string was that you needed for that model. But JT was using those, and I guess at some point, maybe early on, he was using perhaps swing bass strings, but they would have always been round wound. JT's bass tone at that point was certainly never part of the flat wound scene, that's for sure. That lively, almost staccato-like way of playing, and the tone, JT's tone simply jumped out, and I think that's what sort of attracted a lot of bass players to his playing. Was on the records, the bass was very upfront in the mix, and I would imagine live he was still using all of his PV amplification. Could well be that bass tone may have had some amplification in the studio. They may have taken a feed off it. I guess they would also have had a direct XLR feed as well. But certainly there was no escaping the John Taylor bass tone for the early part of the 80s, that's for sure. So yeah, so that kind of takes care of the bass side there. With Prince, who knows what he was using in the studio, but like I say, I think that I think it's called Hour Walled. In fact, I'm going to just quickly check, just bear with me, ladies and gentlemen. I have a bookmark for this manufacturer. Let's have a quick look. I will find it. There we go. It's called Auerswald Instruments, AUERSWALD. If I click on that link, they're still there. So basically, yeah, I think they're still going. There's no reason to say that's not. There's a copyright 2020 on their website. So the company's called Auerswald. I think the guy that made those instruments was called Jerry Auerswald. Makes sense. I think they're German, and I would imagine Prince was using one or two of those basses on that recording. It doesn't sound like any of the alembic stuff which was used on, well, by Brown Mark, obviously, when the Revolution were playing, and also the alembic tone from Sign of the Times. and it doesn't necessarily sound like a standard jazz bass, which would sort of order of the day up till Purple Rain. So who knows? I guess the engineers would know. I've never read too much technical stuff on what he was playing, but you know, Prince used what he wanted when he wanted. So who knows what he was getting that tone from? But I'm guessing this Hours Wall was his sort of thing of choice at the time. Certainly wouldn't have been using the Warwicks. They didn't start appearing until into the 90s, I guess, around Diamond and Pearl's time. Yeah, so I'm guessing it's that. I don't think there's any manufacturer stuff in the liner notes on the CD. But yes, but that bass tone, again, round wounds all the way. I'm thinking he probably used 4505s. But again, I could be wrong. It might be 4000s. We'd need to speak to Prince's tech at the time to have found all that sort of stuff out. But let's be fair, Prince could pick up any instrument with any type of string on, and he would have got a fairly impressive bass tone out of it. You know, this is a guy who picked up a Hohner Telecaster and made it his own, which is why they recalled it the Prinz, P-R-I-N-Z. And not that it was a bad guitar, it certainly wasn't, but he got everything out of that he needed. And the basic perception was the Hohner guitars at the time, as reasonable as they were cheap instruments. But he certainly got a lot of mileage out of that guitar. So there we go. So let's head back onto the live chat. And there's no extra questions at the moment. So I will give this another 10 or 15 minutes, and if anyone out there would like to contribute, feel free. Here on the channel there's going to be a load of bass review videos coming up very shortly. The last stuff that went up was a couple of weeks ago, which was the Billy Sheehan interview from 2021, which looked at the 30th anniversary of Lean Into It, Mr. Big's pivotal album from 1991. So if you haven't checked those videos out, I'll put a link in below, or there may even be, I'll do a card. It will be here, just above where my finger is, I think. So if you want to click on that and check out Billy Sheehan's interview, there's two parts. Both of them last about 35 minutes, and there's a whole load of information in there about Lean Into It, the recording of it, the writing of it, and what happened when they took it out on the road, and all of Billy's memories of the band at that time, and how that album has stood over the past 31 years now, because the interview happened last year. So yeah, there will be bass reviews coming up very shortly, and I've literally got about 7 or 8 ready to go. So I will start delivering those and uploading them very shortly over the next couple of weeks. And then hopefully, with a bit of luck, there will be another round of Essential Bass albums. And I've wanted to put that in there. That was originally going to be in the first run, and there were so many other things I had to include first that this one got put on the back burner, but this one will feature in that next run. Rio is already available here on the channel. There's a I think it's a 7-minute video, Essential Bass albums. Again, I'll put a link in the description box, and I can do a link here as well. I try to look on the camera. Where's my finger go? Needs to go there. There we go. So there'll be a link there if you want to click on it. It'll take you through to the Essential Bass album video of Rio. So there we go. I hope this has been informative. I hope you probably heard some things maybe that you didn't know. Oh, I think there's some Real Billy Miller. Is that Bill Miller that I used to play with in a Level 42 tribute band? It could be. It might not be. I'm guessing it could be, because the fact you brought up Level 42 albums. Yes, there is a Level 42 album in there. In fact, Level 42, the first one. Again, hi Bill. It is you. Hope you're well. Hope the family are all good. I'll put a link to the level 42 one in the description box below, and I can put another card here. So if you're watching this after the event, you can click on this card and it will take you through to the level 42 essential bass album video, which is a popular video. Actually, I think it's the most watched one on the channel of that series. Hope you're well, Bill. Been a long time. Bill used to be the singer in a level 42 tribute band I was in. Goodness, now that is going back 25 years ago. We set that up. I came to meet you in Wimbledon, so we talk business. Thank you, mate. Thank you for joining. This live chat was very kind of last minute. I wasn't necessarily planning on doing this, but it just occurred that these two albums were on their anniversary today, and I'd never put two and two together that they were released on the same date. So just thought it would be a good topic of conversation. Looking good, ish, I think is a good description. So-so's about right. Yeah, so if anyone else is out there, I can see there are people, I can see the viewer count right there. If you got any questions about either of these two albums, fire away, stick them up, and I'll do my best to answer them from my perspective. If there's nothing else coming in the next couple of minutes, I'll wrap this up and let you get back to your evenings. But thank you very much for watching. If you're watching this on catch up, because this will now be on the channel until the day the channel stops. So if you're watching this at a later date, if you've got any questions or comments regarding this video or any of the other videos on the channel, feel free to leave them in the comments section underneath this video, and I'll come back to you as soon as I can. If you want to try and follow me on social media, you can. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. There's going to be some merchandise coming up. In fact, I don't actually know what the time frame of that is, but hopefully I've got some merchandise designs coming into play. And there's also, I will be announcing shortly the membership for this channel. So I'm still trying to ascertain if I want to do a tiered system. So a different level has a different price, and what you get at the different levels is different. Or I may just do one standard price across the channel, and everyone that goes for the membership side of things will get the same entitlements regarding the videos on the channel. I should also point out, if you're enjoying this video and you're watching it at a later date, or even if you're watching it right now, you can support the channel financially. Underneath the chat section, you will see there's a dollar sign, a dollar bill, so you can actually contribute to the if you like, the costs of doing the channel, and you know, equipment purchase and studio hire for filming, and buying equipment for review, and all of the bits and pieces that go into keeping this running. So if you would like to support what I do here on Brooks's Bass Corner, feel free to hit that that dollar sign underneath the chat window. There's also something else that's come into play in the past week or so. I've obviously got to a point with the YouTube algorithm that it's now opened up a thing called super thanks. So basically, when you watch a video, if you look underneath the actual video window, and you'll see various icons, thumbs up, thumbs down, you'll see also on there is a dollar sign. That allows you to donate money to the channel if you've particularly enjoyed a certain video or something that the channel's doing, or if you're watching a whole bunch of videos and you think, actually, I really like what I'm doing here on Brooks's Bass Corner, you can click on that and you can donate money to the channel. That is entirely up to you. If you do that, it's great for me. It means I can keep this going, and it means I can kind of oil the wheels and the cogs that make this channel work. So if you'd like to do that, that would be fabulous. You don't have to, but if you'd like to, that would be great. Also, if you've enjoyed this video or any of the other videos on the channel, feel free to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. You'll get alerts when I'm releasing new videos, or if there's a live chat coming up, or if there's a community tab message. So if you want to talk to me via YouTube, you don't want to necessarily go on a Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, you can communicate through the community tab. So if you're on the desktop, there's a community tab. If you're on the mobile, again, there is a community section. And basically that's where we can talk to each other. So if you want to send me a message or contribute in terms of comments about any of the videos, you can do it there and I'll reply as quickly as I possibly can. Trying to think what else I need to tell you. I think that's probably it for tonight. There are no other questions coming through. So I will bid you farewell. Thank you very much for joining me, whether you're on the live chat now or you're watching this after the event. If you want to check out any of the other live chats, they're all stored on the channel. You can reach them via the live section, and you'll see all the previous live chats that we've done. So there will be videos uploaded very shortly, instrument reviews, bass reviews coming imminently, and hopefully very shortly some more Essential Bass album videos. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you for contributing to those who have. Look forward to seeing you very soon, and look forward to seeing you here on Brooks's Bass Corner. Take care. Have a good evening. Cheers.